Welcome back, folks. Saddle up, pour yourself a cup of strong coffee, and settle in by the fire. This is a place for dusty trails, forgotten journals, and stories whispered by the wind across the plains. Here on the Cowboy's Notebook, we dig into the strange, the haunting, and the unforgettable tales of the Old West. Tonight's story is one folks around the high desert still argue about, because depending on who you ask, it was either a miracle, a curse, or a hard lesson learned too late. The sun was dropping low behind the red mesas when Ezekiel Crow rode into the valley with a limp in his horse and a scowl carved deep into his face. Ezekiel was a rancher by trade and by temperament, the kind of man who believed the land yielded only to stubbornness. He had carved his spread out of stubborn soil with calloused hands and a will that refused to bend, and folks respected him for it. They also knew better than to cross him. The valley he entered wasn't on most maps. It was a wide bowl of sagebrush and stone, cut by a thin ribbon of water that vanished underground before reaching the far hills. At its edge stood an old mission, sun-bleached and cracked, its bell silent for years. Travelers avoided it, saying the place carried echoes that didn't belong to the living. Ezekiel didn't believe in echoes of that kind. To him, land was land and buildings were just wood and stone. His reason for coming was simple. He was hurt. Weeks earlier, a rustler's bullet had grazed him during a night raid. It wasn't a clean wound. The lead had torn through muscle and left something behind. Ezekiel could feel it sometimes, a deep, aching pressure that flared when he worked too long or slept the wrong way. The nearest doctor was 2 days' ride, and Ezekiel had already waited too long. Fever came and went, his strength faded. Still, he rode. Inside the mission lived one person, or so the rumor said. A nun who had stayed behind when everyone else fled. Some said she was there to atone for something. Others claimed she was guarding an artifact too dangerous to move. Ezekiel had laughed when he heard those stories, but laughter came easier when a man wasn't sick. He tied his horse to the broken fence and pushed open the mission door. Dust swirled in the slanted light. The air smelled of old candles and dry stone. From the shadows near the altar, a woman rose slowly. She was small, dressed in a worn habit, her hair silver at the temples. Her eyes, though, were sharp as cut glass. "I knew someone would come eventually," she said, her voice calm but wary. "The land always brings the desperate." Ezekiel tipped his hat out of habit. "Name's Crow. I was told you might help." The nun studied him for a long moment. Her gaze lingered on the way he favored his side, the sheen of sweat on his brow. "Help comes in many forms," she said. "Not all of them are gentle." "I'm not looking for gentle," Ezekiel replied. "I'm looking to live." She motioned for him to sit on a bench near the wall. As he lowered himself, pain flashed across his face despite his effort to hide it. The nun moved with practiced ease, fetching water, clean cloth, and a small wooden box from beneath the altar. "You have something inside you that doesn't belong," she said quietly. Ezekiel snorted. "That's what bullets tend to do." She shook her head. "Not just the bullet, what clings to it? Where it came from, who fired it. Some things carry more than metal." He rolled his eyes. "Sister, I appreciate the concern, but I don't hold with ghost stories." The nun opened the wooden box. Inside lay a small smooth stone wrapped in faded red cloth. Symbols were etched into its surface, worn but deliberate. Ezekiel leaned forward despite himself. "What's that?" he asked. "Something older than this mission," she replied. "Brought here long before the war. It was meant to draw sickness out, to give it a place to settle so it wouldn't rot the body from within." Ezekiel frowned. "You're telling me that rock can fix me?" "I'm telling you it can take what's harming you," she said. "But it doesn't destroy it, it holds it." "And where does it go after that?" Her hands stilled. She looked up at him, eyes serious. "That is where the danger lies." Ezekiel shifted, wincing. "Danger doesn't scare me half as much as dying slow." "If you've got a way to pull this misery out, I'll take it." The nun hesitated. "Once it's done, the stone must be sealed away again." "Buried deep, never used lightly?" "Every time. It's awakened, it asks for more." Ezekiel chuckled weakly. "Sounds like most tools I've ever owned." She didn't smile. This is not a tool, and it is not meant for men who refuse to listen. She began to unwrap the stone, and as she did, the air in the mission seemed to grow heavier, as if the walls themselves were leaning in. Ezekiel felt a strange sensation in his chest, not pain but awareness. Like something had noticed him, the nun placed the stone against his wounded side. The contact was cold, shockingly so. Ezekiel sucked in a breath. "Wait," he said. "You're putting that inside me?" Her hands paused. "It must touch what's wrong. It must be close enough to draw it out." He swallowed. "You should have led with that." "I tried to warn you," she said softly. "You didn't want to hear it." Before he could protest further, she pressed the stone firmly against him and began to chant under her breath. The words weren't in English or Spanish. They rolled and twisted, filling the room with a low vibration that made Ezekiel's teeth ache. Heat flared beneath the stone, spreading through his side. He cried out, gripping the bench until his knuckles went white. Images flashed behind his eyes. The night of the raid. The muzzle flash. The rustler's face contorted with fear as much as rage. The moment the bullet struck, then a pulling sensation. Deep and insistent. Ezekiel felt as if something was being dragged through him, not flesh but memory and pain knotted together. The pressure he'd lived with for weeks surged, then suddenly vanished. The stone grew warm, almost hot, and the nun snatched it away, wrapping it quickly in the cloth again. Ezekiel sagged forward, gasping. When he straightened, the pain was gone, not dulled, gone. He laughed, a raw sound of disbelief. "I'll be damned," he said. "It worked." The nun's face was pale, for now she cleaned the wound, and to Ezekiel's astonishment, the inflammation had receded. The angry red edges looked calm, as if days of healing had passed. In minutes, he stood testing his weight. Strength flowed back into his limbs. He felt lighter, clearer, alive. "You saved me," he said. "Whatever that stone is, it's a miracle." "It is a burden," she corrected, "and now part of it knows you." Ezekiel waved off her concern. He reached for his coin pouch. "Name your price." She shook her head. "I don't take payment. I take promises." "What kind?" "That you won't seek this out again. That you won't tell others where to find it. That you'll leave this valley and let the stone sleep." Ezekiel hesitated only a moment. "You have my word." He mounted his horse and rode out as the sun dipped below the horizon. Behind him, the mission stood silent once more. For a time, Ezekiel kept his promise. He returned to his ranch stronger than before, working harder, pushing further. He told folks the doctor had done his job, nothing more, but something had changed. When trouble came, Ezekiel found it easier to face. Too easy, he stopped feeling fear the way he used to. Loss didn't weigh on him. Pain slid off like rain. At first, he thought it was confidence. Then people started noticing. He made harsher decisions. He drove off neighbors over small disputes. When rustlers returned, he chased them alone into the hills and came back without a scratch. His eyes cold and distant. At night he dreamed of the stone. He dreamed of warmth and fullness, of a hollow place inside him that wanted to be filled. Again, months later, when sickness swept through the ranch hands, Ezekiel remembered the mission. He remembered how easy it had been. How final. He saddled his horse and rode back to the valley. The mission door stood open. Inside, candles burned low. The nun waited by the altar, as if she'd known he was coming. "You broke your promise," she said. He spread his hands. "People are dying. You can help." She shook her head. "The stone has already taken too much from you," he frowned. "I feel fine." "That's the lie it tells," she replied. "It doesn't just take sickness. It takes what makes you human, piece by piece, to make room for what it holds." Ezekiel's jaw tightened. "I didn't come here to argue." He stepped toward the altar. The nun moved to block him. "I warned you," she said. "I warned you the first time." He shoved her aside. She fell hard against the stone floor, the sound echoing through the mission. Ezekiel grabbed the wooden box and tore it open. The stone lay inside, waiting, warm to the touch. As his fingers closed around it, pain exploded through his body. Not the sharp pain of injury, but a deep, crushing weight. Memories he hadn't known were missing came rushing back all at once. Fear, regret, faces of men he'd wronged. Choices he'd made without care. He staggered, dropping to his knees. The nun struggled to her feet. "It won't obey you," she said. "It never did?" The stone pulsed in his hand, growing hotter. Ezekiel screamed as the hollow inside him filled, not with relief, but with everything he'd tried to cast off. It was too much. His heart gave out under the strain. When dawn came, the valley was quiet. The nun buried the stone deep beneath the mission floor, sealing it with prayer and tears. She'd buried Ezekiel beside the mesquite tree out back, marking the grave with a simple cross. Travelers still avoid that valley. Some say on certain nights you can hear a bell ring from a mission that shouldn't have one. Others claim a man's voice echoes across the sage, warning anyone who listen that some cures cost more than the sickness. And if you ever find yourself desperate enough to ignore a warning, remember this story. In the Old West, survival often meant knowing when to stop, and some things were never meant to be put inside you at all. If you enjoyed this tale, ride with us again next time. There are plenty more stories waiting in the dust, and the pages of the Cowboy's notebook are far from full.